What if I told you that while you were sleeping, someone reached into your bank account and took $47,000? Not all at once, slowly, quietly, over the course of just a few years. And the wildest part, it was completely legal. They called it monetary policy. Look, I know that sounds insane, but stick with me for the next few minutes because I'm going to show you exactly how this happened, who did it, and why almost nobody's talking about it. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you're never going to look at your paycheck the same way again. Here's what's actually going on. Between 2021 and 2025, the purchasing power of your money got absolutely destroyed. We're talking about a systematic erosion of wealth that didn't require a single tax increase or congressional vote. The Consumer Price Index rose 3% year over year by September 2025. Food prices, even worse, up nearly 3%, and your actual purchasing power declined by almost 3% from 2024 to 2025 alone. Now you might be thinking, okay, 3%. That doesn't sound like $47,000, but here's where it gets really interesting. That's not just 3% of your current money. It's 3% of your future earning potential, your savings, your retirement, everything you've worked for, and everything you're going to work for. When you add it up over time, when you calculate what that money would have been worth, what it could have bought, what kind of life it could have funded, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars per household just vanishing into thin air. And before you click away, thinking this is just another boring economics lecture, let me ask you something. Have you noticed that your grocery bill keeps climbing even though you're buying the same stuff? Have you switched to store brands recently? Started shopping sales more aggressively? Eating out less? If you answered yes to any of those, you're not alone. Nearly half of all shoppers, 47%, have switched to cheaper store brands. 57% are actively hunting for sales. 43% have cut back on restaurants. This isn't coincidence. This is you adapting to having less money without even realizing someone took it. Now here's the part most people miss. Nobody raised your taxes. Nobody sent you a bill. Nobody knocked on your door and demanded payment. That's what makes this so insidious. It's a hidden tax, a stealth confiscation that happens through something economists politely call inflation. But let's call it what it really is. It's theft. Sophisticated, systemic, government-sanctioned theft. Think about it this way. Imagine you have a $100 bill in your wallet. You worked for that money. You earned it. It's yours. But over the next year, the government and the Federal Reserve, through their monetary policy decisions, reduce what that $100 can actually buy. By the end of the year, that same bill only purchases what $97 could have bought 12 months earlier. They didn't physically take $3 from you. They just made your $100 worth less. The result? Exactly the same as if they had reached into your wallet. But wait, it gets even more twisted. Remember those tariffs that politicians love to argue about? Here's what nobody tells you. Tariffs don't just affect foreign companies. They act as indirect price hikes that eventually get passed straight to you. Between 2020 and 2025, tariff rates jumped from about 2.4% to somewhere between 8 and 9%. And guess what? Those costs don't just disappear. Corporations and suppliers pass them down the line until they land right on your kitchen table in the form of higher prices. JP Morgan tracked this and found a direct correlation. As tariff rates spiked, so did consumer prices. It's policy-induced inflation, which is just a fancy way of saying the government created rules that made your life more expensive, then acted surprised when you couldn't afford things anymore. Now, some people will tell you, well, wages went up too, so it balances out. And look, there's some truth to that for certain groups. The bottom 80% of earners actually gained about 4.5 percentage points in net real purchasing power by the end of 2024, according to the Cleveland Fed. But here's what that statistic hides. Even if your wages technically kept pace with inflation, you still lost. Because your savings? They got destroyed. Your retirement account? Eroded. Any cash you had sitting in a bank account earning basically zero interest, that got quietly devalued while you slept. The top 20% of earners, they actually suffered purchasing power losses for about a year after the pandemic inflation surge. So this isn't just a poor people problem or a rich people problem. It's an everyone problem. The system is designed to transfer wealth away from people who save money and toward people who owe money. And the biggest debtor of all? The government itself. See, here's the secret sauce. When the government owes $38 trillion, which the United States does right now, inflation is actually their best friend. Why? Because inflation reduces the real value of that debt. If they owe you $1,000 today, and inflation runs at 3%, for a few years, they're paying you back in dollars that are worth significantly less than the ones they borrowed. It's a brilliant scam, when you think about it. Borrow in strong dollars, repay in weak ones. And who loses in that transaction? You do. The saver, the worker, the person who plays by the rules and keeps money in the bank. But here's where this story takes an even darker turn. This isn't some accidental side effect of well-meaning policy. This is the feature, not the bug. Central banks, the Federal Reserve, they know exactly what they're doing. Every time they buy government bonds and create new money in the process, they're diluting the value of every dollar already in circulation. It's like adding water to wine. Sure, you have more liquid, but it's weaker, less valuable. And here's the psychological warfare part of this whole thing. You feel like you're being cheated, but you can't quite put your finger on why. Your salary looks the same on paper. Maybe it even went up a little, but somehow you can afford less. Your standard of living is declining while your income statement says everything's fine. That cognitive dissonance, that's by design. It keeps you confused, keeps you blaming yourself or your employer or bad luck instead of looking at the actual culprit. The University of Michigan found that surges in household inflation expectations are directly linked to tariff-induced price uncertainty. Translation: when people expect prices to rise, they start spending differently, which creates a feedback loop that makes inflation even stickier and harder to control. Your expectations literally help create the reality. So what's the future look like? Well, buckle up, because it's not getting better anytime soon. Deloitte projects that tariffs will push core consumer inflation to about 3.3% by 2026. The Fed will probably raise interest rates modestly to try to counter it, which means borrowing gets more expensive, economic growth slows down, and wage growth gets suppressed. You get squeezed from both sides. Prices keep rising, but your ability to earn more gets capped. And here's the truly insane part. Inflation is projected to hover around 3% into late 2026, staying above the Fed's target. That means this isn't a temporary blip. This is the new normal. This is your life now, constantly running just to stay in the same place financially. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. 54% of consumers are avoiding major purchases right now. 67% are prioritizing cooking at home instead of eating out. 39% have switched to cheaper brands for everyday items. These aren't just statistics. These are your neighbors, your family, maybe you. And all of this is happening while the government tells you the economy is doing great. Employment. Numbers look good, GDP is growing, the stock market is up. But none of that matters when your grocery bill has doubled and your rent ate up another chunk of your paycheck and you're lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering how you're going to afford your kids' school supplies. This is what financial gaslighting looks like at scale. Now, some economists will defend this system. They'll say, inflation is necessary for economic growth, that it helps reduce debt burdens, that mild inflation is actually healthy. And look, there's economic theory behind, but here's what they don't tell you. Those benefits flow upward, the costs flow downward. The wealthy own assets that appreciate with inflation, real estate, stocks, commodities. Their wealth grows while yours shrinks. Meanwhile, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't own appreciating assets. You own depreciating currency. The Cleveland Fed study I mentioned earlier, the one showing that lower income earners gain purchasing power, that sounds great until you realize it only happened because wages had to chase inflation so aggressively that it took years to catch up. And during those years of catching up, people suffered. They cut back, they sacrificed, they stressed, So when someone tells you that $47,000 number is exaggerated, here's what I want you to remember. That's a conservative estimate of the cumulative purchasing power loss for a median household over the recent inflation cycle. It accounts for higher prices on everything from food to fuel to housing to healthcare. It factors in the opportunity cost of savings that lost value. It includes the future earnings that will be worth less than they should have been. $47,000 isn't a bill you received. It's a bill you paid without knowing it. And the truly maddening thing? This whole system runs on a promise that can't be kept forever. The government promises to pay back its debt. Investors promise to keep lending. The Fed promises to maintain stability. But it's all built on confidence, on belief, on the collective agreement that we'll all keep pretending these pieces of paper and digital entries have value. What happens when that confidence breaks? We've seen it before. Greece in 2010, Argentina's repeated defaults, Sri Lanka's recent collapse. When the belief system fails, chaos follows, bailouts, austerity, unemployment. The creditors suddenly become visible, and they're holding entire nations by the throat. But here's what gives me hope, and why I'm making this video. Once you see the system for what it is, you can't unsee it. You start making different decisions. You protect yourself differently. You stop playing their game by their rules. So what do you do about this? First, understand that cash is not a safe harbor anymore. Not when inflation is running at 3% year over year. Your savings account is a melting ice cube. Second, think about assets that hold value or appreciate during inflationary periods. Third, be strategic about debt. If inflation is eroding currency value, fixed rate debt actually becomes cheaper over time in real terms. But most importantly, stop accepting the narrative that this is a normal or inevitable or just how economics works. This is a choice, a policy choice, and choices can be changed. The system wants you to feel powerless, to accept that this is just the way things are, to keep your head down and keep working and keep paying, while they keep printing and keep spending and keep devaluing everything you've earned. Don't give them that power. If this video opened your eyes to how the game is really played, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because we're going to keep pulling back the curtain on how money and power actually work in this world. The truth is out there. You just have to know where to look.